welcome to another edition of Education is the Best Medicine. And thanks for watching. And remember, public access is your best bet. Today is a discussion on Alzheimer's disease. I believe it to be one of the diseases that's underdiagnosed and undertreated, and both my guests, Dr. Smith and Ms. Williams, will hopefully agree with me. I've asked them to come on because I've seen them in the community, and they're going to give you their titles. Then we're just going to start getting into a discussion on Alzheimer's as a disease. Please introduce yourself.
I'm Tina Williams, and I'm with the Alzheimer's Association of Northern California and Northern Nevada. And I do outreach in the African American community. And
you do a lot of other things too.
I do outreach, we do education, workshops, and we have workshops that we take to churches, community centers, organizations, trying to get the word out about Alzheimer's disease, which is quite serious. There's an epidemic, in fact, in the African American community.
Dr. Smith, tell us a little bit about yourself, your position, your title, and what you're doing.
My name is Patricia Smith, and I'm the Multicultural Program Manager for the Alzheimer's Association. Part of what I do is also outreach as well. I'm currently looking into the Contra Costa County area to speak with many clinics and as many as I can, and programs for seniors to talk about and promote the Alzheimer's Association and talk about Alzheimer's disease and dementing illnesses, and to let people know how they affect certain communities, and to get the word out and to try to make an impact in that area.
I want to make sure we get the website out, and as you watch the screen, it'll be coming up. I'd also like to dedicate this show to Mr. and Mrs. Green, family that is dealing with Alzheimer, and I had a chance to talk with him, and also to Reverend Sauls and his congregation for being having active leadership in our community in regard to sponsoring Alzheimer. In fact, they did a program that we met at, Remember Me Before and Now, and I had a chance to hear both of you speak. I was quite impressed. First of all, ladies, let's talk a little bit about Alzheimer's. Is it just a disease of the elderly?
Actually, most people who get Alzheimer's disease are at least 65 or older. However, there are people who are younger who can have it. I mean, and when you're younger than 65, we call that early onset. That simply means a person is younger than 65. But the fact is that about 10% of people 65 or over may possibly have Alzheimer's. And by the time they reach 85 years of age, about 50% would say. So.
Dr. Smith, tell us a little bit about the genetic issues. I understand that there's about 3 genes that affect this disease on chromosome 21, if I'm not mistaken, and it's amyloid precursor protein that seems to be the issue. Could you talk a little bit about that?
ApoE is a gene that they've identified. That's one of the genes that I'm most familiar with, that they've identified as possibly being the cause of Alzheimer's disease. And it's certainly one of the things that we're looking at in terms of African Americans. One of the things that have come up recently in the research is that African Americans may be most affected by, or may have that gene. It may be more prevalent in the African American community.
You know, we talked about some issues in terms of increased risks when a relative has Alzheimer, as well as issues of primary care provider, which I want you to speak to. What are some of the issues in terms of, again, primary care issues, as well as primary support issues as a caregiver?
Most people who have Alzheimer's disease, especially in our community, are cared for at home by family members. And there are services available, and many families are not aware of that. And Alzheimer's is a disease that affects the whole family. And Alzheimer's is a journey. It's a tough journey, it's a long journey. It can last as long as 20 years. Anyone caring for someone with dementia or Alzheimer's disease cannot do it alone. It takes the services and family. The church is very important.
Dr. Smith, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about special referral, because we're going to jump right here, because you guys are just so articulate. I want to, the need for neurologists or gerontologists and the diagnosis of this disease, and we're going to get to a little diagnosis, but what is your feeling on the need for specialists?
Right. Well, that's through, generally, we like to tell people that they need to seek the help of someone who is able to give them all the information that they need, and that's through a diagnostic center sometimes, or through neurology services that are comprehensive, and that would mean that they would need to have neuropsych testing, they would need to have brain scans, they would need to have lab work. And a physician who is knowledgeable, either a neurologist, geriatric physician, or a primary care physician who is knowledgeable about dementing illnesses, and specifically Alzheimer's disease in this case, and who is able to get the entire history, not just from the person, of course, because you may not always be able to get that history from the person because of the memory problems, but from the family. And history means what kinds of problems they've exhibited in the past. It could be asking questions about previous head injuries, any kinds of things like that.
Do you think the disease in our community and communities of color is underdiagnosed, undertreated, or underevaluated?
I do. I think there are many causes for that, or many reasons. Some have to do with the lack of knowledge in terms of the illness itself. The awareness that this illness, and we can certainly say that about all communities, but certainly we can say that about the African American community. Many times when people are, if they don't seek regular medical care, the doctor may not always know that there are changes going on, or may not always recognize that the person is having problems, or they may be covering it up. And so they may not be getting that information from their primary care physician. There's also the fact that many times family members don't recognize that there's a problem, and the person, again, may be covering it up and masking it in some way. So.
The Greens talked to me about, fear and needs for placement, the issues around aggression, particularly in the African American community. They thought it was underdiagnosed. Early diagnosis was an issue for them. They felt that the disease was not diagnosed early enough, and the fear of telling family members and partners was a stigma. And they even talked about the structure of the family that's changed in regards to the support system that we've had in the past. How do you feel about that, and what do you think are some of those key issues that through therapy and through what we have now we could address?
I agree with that. So often, many in the African American community feel that dementia or memory problems are a part of aging. And so often when there are signs, there are clear signs, but you have to know what the signs are. And so often we fluff it off and say, oh, they're just getting old. And the fact is, Alzheimer's disease is not a normal part of aging. It's a disease.
Well, that comes to our question. What is Alzheimer's? Who is affected? What are the signs and symptoms?
Okay. Alzheimer's disease is a progressive degenerative disease that affects the brain, and it prevents one from thinking, reasoning, and doing everyday tasks as you once did. It affects daily life, basically. There may be, certainly there's times in the very beginning of the disease when people recognize that we suspect that people recognize that they're having problems, but they do hide it. But they sometimes are unable to do many things that they once did, for instance, house cleaning, going to the grocery store, balancing their checkbook, certainly things like that. So.
As you mentioned, Alzheimer's is the most common dementia affecting people 65 years of age and older. I understand that there may be a younger presentation in people of color, particularly Africans in America. I'd like you to speak to that. In terms of medical care and cost, what are the concerns around those issues, and again, the toll on the family?
The toll is great. The caregiver is actually the hidden victim or the hidden patient. As the Alzheimer's patient gets worse, the dementia increases, the burden to the caregiver is heavier, and it's going to continue that way, and therefore And so often the caregiver health deteriorates. And so often, many times they even die before the Alzheimer's patient does. And also sometimes the Alzheimer's patient may be in pretty good health physically. They may be in pretty good physical condition.
Okay.
Yeah.
Doc, how do you make the diagnosis? What are some of the cardinal symptomatology in terms of it? What role does depression and mood disorders play in this disease? And again, the concern around hallucinations and paranoid thoughts, because there seems to be a discussion around the different presentations.
Well, certainly when you look at the disease, not everyone presents the same way. Someone might have, more behavior problems than another person. Personalities do change in a way. Sometimes people become more aggressive. Sometimes they're more sedate than they once were, and not as outgoing as they once were. So it presents in many different ways. The diagnosis is actually made through, by a series of things, like history, for instance, something that I mentioned previously, history, getting the history from the family, and from and certainly talking with the patient, with the client as well. And then brain scans, CAT scan is one of the things that we tend to recommend that people ask the doctor to provide. And lab work, B12 deficiency, and they look at infections, lab, right, exactly.
Okay.
Whether the thyroid is imbalanced, that can cause
Even the
memory
HIV
problems.
test?
Well, that's certainly one of the things that has been done
Okay.
through looking at the diagnoses, and then the B12 deficiency can cause memory problems as well.
So you want to rule out the medical causes
Exactly.
first before you move to a
Exactly.
pure diagnosis
Right.
of Alzheimer's.
Exactly.
Um,
And Alzheimer's disease is a clinical diagnosis. It's not, it's usually, it becomes definitive once, if someone requests an autopsy at the end of their life, of course.
Okay.
And generally, in the majority of the cases, the doctors have been right. It has been Alzheimer's disease.
okay. You talked about community issues. What do you think is lacking in terms of community issues? The Greens talked about denial and fears in regards to community acceptance of this disease. What in your mind are some of those? Are those valid issues? I think there are. What in your mind are some of those issues, and how can we address them?
Yes, I agree with that. We really need to be better educated. And the earlier a person is diagnosed, the better. So often, it's early on when when help is available, which will allow the patient to live a more normal type life longer. There are going to be issues. They can still make decisions, help make decisions about financial issues and what's going to happen, and just the family, can come together and make these decisions. And also, some things that cause memory problems are reversible.
Okay.
And things like some things
Could help get the job done, like counseling, those kinds of issues?
yes, and things that talking about memory loss and memory problems. Many seniors take medications, multiple meds, and one of the side effects of medications interacting can be memory problems,
Doc,
and that's something that certainly can be corrected.
Doc, I want to talk about some of the medical illnesses that would mimic dementia/Alzheimer's, and the role of diabetes, hypertension, in terms of treatment of those diseases that might affect the outcomes in Alzheimer's.
Those are two disease. Certainly hypertension and diabetes are linked to Alzheimer's disease, and that's more prevalent within the African American community. Those two diseases. So those can certainly, and controlling one's diabetes, controlling their weight, controlling, and certainly lifestyle certainly has a lot to do with it as well. Controlling your weight, controlling, and learning about health issues, what to eat, what not to eat, things like that, smoking and things like that. So.
Okay. We talk about level of care and end-stage care. how is that best handled? Living will, dialogue with family. How do you best prepare people for the eventual end in Alzheimer's disease?
We encourage families to come together for meetings. And, well, first of all, I think a really good place to start to get some of these questions answered is to call the Alzheimer's Association. Call our 800 number. We have what we call our helpline. And these are volunteers who are specially trained to answer whatever questions. But that's an excellent place to start. So often people, when a problem arises with dementia, the family members may be puzzled. They don't know what's going on. They know nothing about what's happening or what has happened. And another thing about Alzheimer's disease, so often, and it's so
Undercapped?
no,
Undercapped?
well, yes, but the length of time, generally, when we call for help to get outside help,
The course of the disease.
it's sometimes 5 years down the road.
Okay. Doc, I want to ask you about some of the alternative therapies. I want to ask you about the cholinesterase inhibitors, I'm saying correctly, in regards to treatment and how effective they are. I know I was reading some literature about combination therapy. Could you give us some of the common kinds of drugs and probably their uses as well as the use of vitamin E and some of the other alternative therapies?
Well, there have been quite a few studies about vitamin E. There was certainly something that came out several years ago saying that vitamin E would help, you know. It was one of the things that would help. That study wasn't necessarily conclusive. So it just, I mean, certainly if people, you know, want to take vitamin E, you know, with their doctor's recommendation, I think it's okay. It's up to them. But it's not necessarily something that would help in terms of Alzheimer's disease. Aricept is one of the common medications that is prescribed for people that are diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. So.
All right. And they have some new ones coming out, and I guess the mechanism of action is to slow down the death of the brain cell death, as well as blocking of the protein, as well as creation of more acetylcholine. I think that's
well, one of the things that they're trying to do is and I'm not up on all the research, but one of the things that if they can, if they can actually, certainly things like medications like Aricept will not help in terms of slowing down the memory loss, but it may help to bring back some memory for a time, and many times it helps with behavior problems. But certainly they're trying to, if they can, they're trying to create vaccinations and medications that will help to slow the progression of the disease. And certainly if they're working towards that, and that will give researchers more time in order to learn more about Alzheimer's disease as well. So.
What are some of the programs that you're involved in at this particular juncture in terms of getting the word out about Alzheimer's and that kind of thing? Again, strong community person, and you know we're always in the same community venues together. So what's on the plate?
Okay, we have a number of presentations that we do, and I mentioned going out to churches. I do that a lot at churches. One of our really popular presentations, which takes about an hour, is called Maximizing Your Memory. We call that a very gentle topic, and people are more open to listening to that. If we say we're going to give a talk about Alzheimer's disease, chances are people, it's scary. And sometimes people just will not go. But say maximizing your memory, they show up. And during question and answer period, guess what most of the questions are?
I don't know, tell me.
About Alzheimer's.
Oh, okay.
What is Alzheimer's? You know, what is, they want, the questions that come out are mostly things concerning Alzheimer's disease. But, you know, getting them there is the thing. And maximizing your memory, we have one on ABC, Alzheimer's, beginning to cope. There's one on caregiving issues, which is, and we have a new campaign going on now called Maintain Your Brain. And this is specifically aimed at baby boomers, people who are healthy and vital, still working and doing just fine. This is just trying to help them perhaps sort of ward off Alzheimer's.
What got you started in this field, and what brought you to this level of competence? You know,
Right. Well, I thank you for that. I've worked in the elder field for about 16 years now, and I started working with a day program, and then I moved on to a diagnostic center myself. So I have been, I think it's also, this is one of the fields that I have been most passionate about as well, working with seniors and being able to make a difference, I think, within the community and talking to people, talking to younger folks about the problems of our elders.
I want to make sure we get the website up and make sure, again, to visit the Alzheimer website for the continued discussion. Be aware of the community events. These ladies are anchored in the community. I want to thank them both for coming and showing so much love to us in regards to this informational exercise. Cost. What is the cost of taking care of this disease? Untold,
It's
I understand.
right, yeah.
It's the cost. I don't even know if you could put a figure on it. It's a great cost.
Okay.
Great cost, and time and money.
And you were saying something about the extension of the time from diagnosis to progression to chronic and debilitating Alzheimer. What is that time frame about in terms of a person with mild memory problems to a person that gets to where they're disabled in the average?
Oh, okay. I see.
It could be anywhere from 5 to 20 years.
Okay.
With the average being roughly about 8 years.
Okay.
Exactly.
Does it come as a surprise to families, are you finding?
Many times it
Yeah.
does. Many
Yes.
times it does. And certainly one of the things that's hardest for them to hear, I think more so than I've heard people in the past say, oh, I was hoping it was a stroke, you know, and not Alzheimer's disease. So people are very surprised by it, and yes.
This is a multifactorial and multi-layered disease, it appears, neurological in origin. What do you see in the future for the disease in terms of evaluation, treatment, you know, patient care services? And do you think the government, political levels, either local, state or federal, has their pulse on this particular disease?
Well, we're hoping the awareness will. I think that's why many of us, including that work with the Alzheimer's Association, many people in this area are hoping that we can get the word out and educate people about what happens, about the dementing illness, and destigmatize it as well. So many people certainly think it's a mental illness when it's not. In fact, it's a totally different disease. Exactly, exactly. It certainly isn't related. Yeah. So.
I would like to mention too about our support groups that we have around the Bay Area. And I'm involved, I facilitate a support group. We call it Lunch and Learn. These are people.
You're just doing it.
These are people who are caring for family member or friend or someone, older person, with dementia. We meet once a month in Oakland at the North Oakland Senior Center. And we simply come together to express feelings and just vent. And we often have speakers come in.
I think I see it run in some of the local papers in terms of the community
Exactly.
Yeah, we have.
issue.
And it's just, it can be as good as medicine, the support group.
We're starting to wind down. If there's a couple of things you want to share with our audience about Alzheimer's, whether it be, you know, diagnosis, treatment, long-term care, for both of you, what would it be?
I would like to share with you what our mission is. Our mission is creating a world without Alzheimer's disease and enhancing the quality of life of those who live with it. And I might add about the Alzheimer's Association is the largest funder of research. And our main, we get research funds from our memory walk, which is every October, second Saturday in October on Treasure Island. It's a 3-mile walk. And we invite people to join the walk. It's a fun kind of thing. Just call the Alzheimer's Association or check out our website and find out about it.
Sure. One of the things that we didn't talk about is vascular dementia and the strokes, you know, strokes, many strokes. And that can also be a link with Alzheimer's disease. And I think that people need to be aware of the differences. Usually strokes, there's a sudden onset. And with Alzheimer's, of course, there's a progression over time.
Is there a change in treatment because of that, or is the treatment the same?
Right. Well, the treatment, it depends. There are people with, of course, with strokes who also present with Alzheimer's disease as well. So there's people with both those disorders. So.
Okay. Well, we know that Alzheimer's is a brain disease, and a brain disease in which the nerves in the brain die. And we know that the community researchers have sufficient evidence to believe that before the disease is prevalent in the brain, it's already happening. And one of the issues with us right now is prevention. We have about a minute to go. I'll start with you. Final words in regards to the message of Alzheimer's.
When you suspect memory problems of a senior person or elderly person in your family, it is so important to get to the doctors, get diagnosed. It may not be Alzheimer's, and so many things are treatable. And Alzheimer's itself can be helped more early on as opposed to later.
Exactly, and I agree. And it's certainly, and I think one of the things that we need to do in terms of our elders is make sure they have regular medical care, and that could be said for all of us as well. So.
Well, ladies, I want to thank both of you for coming. Definitely, if you bring light to a very dark world, and if vision is the art of seeing things yet unseen, you both are visionary. I want to thank you both for coming on
Thank
and
you.
sharing with us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much.
You.
Okay.
And I think that a whole